Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be continuing on the Z3. I'm going to change out the gasket for the oil filter adapter where it bolts to the block. This is for the 1.9 Z3. Should be fine for any 318 E36 BMW as well. So the gasket is this little guy right here. And then there's also a bushing. It's got some O-rings on it, a little check valve thing. I also recommend changing that out. You've already got it apart, so why not? It's right there. This gasket's like $3-4 bucks. This is actually a genuine BMW part that I've got for the bushing. It was like 18 bucks. So I mean 20 bucks, 25 bucks. And then that's a real common problem where these cars leak on any of the E36 BMWs. So with that, I'm gonna drain the oil and go ahead and do an oil change also, because I'm gonna have the whole filter off. So I'm gonna change out the oil filter. We're gonna change out this gasket, this bushing that's behind the oil filter adapter bugs. And I'm gonna put an air filter in the car. I'm gonna have the air box apart anyway to get to that stuff. So air filter, yesterday I changed the spark plugs whenever I changed the valve cover gasket. So anyway, we'll get to it. So stand by and hope you enjoy the video. Watch it all the way to the end, because a lot of times I'll give you tips at the end that I discover along the way. So anyway, stand by and we'll get going on this project. So I've got the oil draining, jacked the car up, took the oil plug out, set it back down. The oil plug's still out. For some reason on these cars, the oil plug in the oil pan is kind of forward. So once it's draining, I always let the car down all the way with the pan underneath there, so that any of the oil that's at the back of the oil pan will come forward and drain out. So next thing we're going to do is remove the air box and from the throttle body all the way down, and then get this. This is where the air goes over in the air pickup. Goes all the way over here, and then it comes down here, and this is where the fresh air comes into the car through there. So I'm going to get all that out of the way so we can have better access to this. So here's where I'm at. I've got the alternator off, took the alternator off, and then you've got this bracket here that you got to pull back. So there's 4 bolts. You'll see them. There's one down there, and there's 2 more in the front. The 2 in the back and the 2 in the front are separate, different bolt sizes, so you want to make sure you keep track of that. And then once we've got that done, there's a bolt down at the bottom. Let's see if I can get a light in here so you can see that bolt down at the bottom. You got to take that loose, and then once that's loose, you can move this back so this whole assembly tilts back. And then once that's tilted back, you can see you'll be able to get to the bolts. There's 4 bolts on the housing that holds the oil filter on to the engine block. So earlier I said there's 4 bolts. There's actually 6. There's those 2 at the top, there's those 2, and then there's 2 more at the bottom. Now the ones at the bottom, I couldn't get the bolt out completely. because of this bracket that holds the power steering pump and the alternator. I think that I can get it off without removing that. I really don't want to take that whole thing completely loose. So I'm going to try to see if I can do this one-handed, try to get this off now. Oh, yeah. All right, so got some oil dripping down into my pan down there. I'm going to have to put the camera down and try to wiggle that thing out of there. So here's the whole unit taken apart, or taken off the car. There was hardly any of that gasket left. This thing's really dirty. One more thing you got to do before you take it off is there's a plug right here, which is for the oil pressure sensor. Here's the lead for it right here. But anyway, you can see down in there, it's really dirty in there. That thing was definitely leaking oil everywhere. So I'm gonna get all this stuff cleaned up and put it back together. So here's the oil filter housing all cleaned up. I've got my new gasket right here. So the gasket is going to go on like that. So everything matches up. I've got my new bushing there. I'm going to put this in the block first. Let's go here and see what's going on. So I went ahead and took that bracket all the way loose, just so that I could get this in here really well. I've got that all cleaned up, the gasket surface anyway. So I'm gonna start putting this back together. And I've got this pulled back. I want to make sure that I can get in there really good and in a neat way with that oil filter housing, because that gasket's really thin. I don't want to goof that gasket up. So anyway, that's the next step. I'm probably not going to be able to position the camera where you can see me installing it. So I'll just show you what it looks like when I'm done. So I just wanted to show you something here. I tried to kind of do a dry run on this, and it was really hard to get that gasket to stay in place. I was being really delicate with it. So what I've done now is I've taken just a smidge, I mean a teeny tiny bit of silicone, like a smear, and put on it about 3 different places on this on the housing, and then position the gasket to it. So I'm going to let that dry and then put this thing back together. Here's the progress so far. So I've got all the bolts. Let me get a light. Get another light. So here's the progress. Got all the bolts tightened, and since I had a little bit of room here, I went ahead and changed the oil filter too while I was at it. So that's one less step. But anyways, you can see down there all the bolts are in, and they're not super tight, but they're tight enough. I don't know the torque spec on them, but you know, I just kind of gauged on how tight they were when I took them out. So I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together, and then we'll start the car up and see if anything's leaking. All right, we've got everything buttoned up. The last thing I got to do is put the airbox on and connect the air hose that goes to the airbox. So got the belt back on, alternator, all that fun stuff. So last thing I'm going to do is change out the air filter. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it right now with the airbox off. It's going to be a lot easier than doing it with the airbox on the car. So there's the lid to the airbox. Here's the airbox. So one thing I did want to mention is all the parts that I got for this, I got from Pelican Parts. I'm not sponsored by them. Obviously, I've only got a few subscribers. But these guys know what they're talking about as far as BMW stuff. And they're a good place. Prices are pretty good. Anyway, they got everything you need. So check them out. The air filter doesn't look too bad, actually. Okay, so I got it all wrapped up and everything looks good. I backed the car up. There was some oil spilled that I cleaned up, but I backed the car up a little ways out of the garage, and let it idle for about 10 minutes, and there's no oil underneath it. And before that, that thing used to drip quite a bit of oil just sitting there idling. But I've been driving it like that for 2.5 years and keeping an eye on it, so it's been fine. But anyway, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video if you liked it. I hope it was helpful. Some of the things in this video were kind of hard to film, holding the camera and trying to do different things, but I hope that you've got the general idea of how to do it from this video. But anyway, once again, I mean, these old cars, they're not complicated. I think it's kind of cool. This old car right here, I've got the paperwork from the guy that bought it brand new. I'm the actual third owner, but he paid over $32,000 for this car in 1996. Went and put a deposit down before these Z3s came out. And so that's roughly about $53,000 in today's money. So it's kind of cool. I mean, I paid $2,000 for this car with 158,000 miles on it. It's got almost, here in the next week, it'll have 190,000 miles on it. So I've got some good use out of it, and it runs great. I've just fixed the only oil leak that it had. New valve cover gasket in my last video. Spark plugs, did a tune-up on it. I would drive this car anywhere in the world. I drive it 350 miles one way to work when I go out of town for work every 2 weeks. So anyway, with that being said, you can work on these old cars. You can have, to me, this is a cool, super cool car. I know a lot of people look at it and they don't think it's any big deal. But I mean, this car cost a lot of money back in the day. So, and I worked on it. I've maintained it. I've done everything to it since I've owned it. The people that had it before me, obviously, they had a lot of things that they had taken it to the dealer for and had maintained on it. But anyway, please subscribe, help grow the channel. I got to come up with some more videos to keep things rolling. But hopefully the channel will grow. And I mean, I know some of this stuff's kind of boring. It would be super cool to drive around town and show off in Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all that kind of stuff. And who knows, maybe one day, I'm more of a Porsche guy, BMW guy, but one day, you know, 5-10 years from now, maybe the channel will grow into that. But I guarantee you one thing, we won't be driving around town looking at, you know, taking my car to this shop or that shop for them to do this to it and that do it. We're going to be doing all that stuff right here in this garage, just like I do everything else. I don't take anything that I own, I don't take it anywhere to get it fixed. These two hands right here and a bunch of junk, Harbor Freight and old Craftsman tools and things that I've just collected through my life. I don't have any fancy tools. I don't have a lift. I don't have any of that stuff. Everything is done right here in this junky garage, and that's the way it's going to stay. So subscribe, like, share, whatever you want to do. I would appreciate it. Thanks very much. Again, I hope the video was helpful, and just click the subscribe button right down there. It's easy, it's free, and it's much appreciated. Thanks.